Let's head into this newscast with all the latest coming in on the U.S. elections as the Democratic and Republican caucuses are currently underway. But because Trump does not face any serious competition, all eyes are on the Democratic contenders this year. Let's begin by understanding how Democrats pick their presidential candidate. The caucuses and primaries starts months and sometimes years before the main elections. Now, the candidates start their campaign trails with speeches, promises, fundraisings and debates. Above all, the goal for the candidates is to convince voters that they are the right candidate in their whole party to defeat Donald Trump. Now, how does a candidate become a nominee? It's all about winning delegates, and that is done by competing in states across the country. A few states matter more than other states. By tradition, Iowa goes first, and so it becomes the most important one. And so after Iowa, the race moves to the next three big states, New Hampshire, Nevada and South Carolina. These four states are the key to winning nominations. They narrow down the competition and gives the momentum to the key nominees. So the first caucus is a big opportunity for a candidate to pull away from the rest of the pack. The key to the game is to score delegates in state after state after state. There are nearly 4,000 delegates. Whichever candidate wins the most of the available delegates wins the nominations. But the primary contest is not likely to end with most delegates. If a rival has the campaigns, resources and the money, they can stand in the radius and fight until the end. Now that the Iowa caucuses have arrived, the 2020 election is officially upon us. Now we lay out the possible winners from Iowa caucus. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is in a tight race with former Vice President Joe Biden. Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg are trailing behind with a close margin. All signs, energy, polling, campaigning and debating point to a victory for the Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders at the Iowa caucus. Sanders has never really stopped running for president since he lost the nomination to Hillary Clinton in 2016. He is popular with the working class voters and calls himself a democratic socialist. If Sanders wins Iowa, it's hard to see him losing New Hampshire 8 days later. As the former vice president and a national frontrunner, Joe Biden has a legitimate chance to win as well. Thanks to former President Barack Obama, Biden maintains a strength with the African-American voters. Apart from campaigning, he has been pouring money into Iowa TV ads backing his candidacy. He also has served in the Senate for decades. Now, regardless of where he finishes in Iowa, Pete Buttigieg has cemented his status as the breakout star of the 2020 presidential campaign. He is the youngest mayor candidate in the race to the White House. Buttigieg seems to be in a similar spot to where Barack Obama was in 2008, going into the Iowa caucus. He's shown massive promise as a candidate and already exceeded expectations, but Democratic voters still seem to be in a bit of wait-and-see mode. Elizabeth Warren, let's tell you about her. The Massachusetts senator has been flagging for months now as Sanders appears to have emerged as the top choice. But Warren's organization's strength is big, effective, and has been up and running at full strength, longer than anyone else in the field. She helped set up Consumer Financial Protection Bureau under Obama administration and promises big structural changes for this presidential race. Let's now give you a sense of what's happening on ground zero. And for that, I'm currently joined in by our correspondent, Kate Fisher, who's currently in Iowa covering these caucuses. Let's quickly go across to Kate. Kate, a very good morning to you. Give us a sense of ground zero. What's happening at the moment? Polls have been showing Sanders as the favorite in the Iowa caucus.
Yeah, that's right. And they have just begun. So all this talk that we've all been doing for weeks, if not months now, will actually find out who is going to be the favourite, who's in the lead, who is winning these caucuses very shortly. The doors opened at 7 p.m. local time here in Iowa, which is just about half an hour or so ago. It will take probably an hour or so for us to start getting the first results dribbling through, and there has been a real sense of excitement through Iowa because the race is so close. close. We've got these 4 front runners that you've been speaking about: former Vice President Joe Biden, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who appears to have the edge on the most recent polls. You've got Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg, who is the former mayor of a small town in the state of Indiana, yet he has done really well in the polls considering he had so little previous name recognition amongst the American public. So it really is all to play for this evening in Iowa. Those caucuses underway right now in more than 1,600 locations across this state. It's a rural state with not a huge population. Most of the people who live here are white. It's not terribly diverse, but they will be going to their local precinct meeting places like school gymnasiums or village halls, where they will meet and talk and try to persuade each other to back their candidate. They will move to a different part of the room to choose that candidate, and that's how this caucusing works.
Right. Kate, how crucial is the state of Iowa at the moment? What is Iowa's importance to Democrats, and how the Iowa Democratic Caucus has changed of late?
Yeah, Iowa is crucial because, quite simply, it's the first time that any Americans get to cast a vote in this presidential election. So it's the first time that all the talking and pontificating and predictions will actually translate into something real that the candidates and the rest of the American public can look at to try to have a gauge of the popularity of these candidates. So from that perspective, it's really important because it gives us all a kind of insight into how popular and well these candidates do. It also gives the winning candidates some momentum going into the subsequent rounds of voting in the next few states. It also perhaps brings more money to them. More people may donate or volunteer for that campaign. So from that side, it is really important. But as I mentioned, it is not a big state. It is not a diverse state. It doesn't represent America, really, because it has such a small population. So if you want to look at it as an example of how the rest of the country is going to vote, it's not going to give you the best example for that. But in terms of being a kind of example of who has got the momentum and who could be a front runner, then it is really important.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that who could be the front runner is going to be something that we could deduce out of the Iowa caucus. And if polls are anything to go by, certainly Bernie Sanders has the lead. What could this mean if Bernie Sanders actually emerges as the victor out of the caucus?
Well, it will be something of an upset for the moderates in the party. Those Democrats that like a centre road, don't want to go too far left, don't want to have a democratic socialist, which is how Bernie Sanders describes himself, as the leader of their party. So it will be a big change for them. Of course, Bernie Sanders was defeated by Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that pleased the moderate part of the Democratic Party. So there will be concern by them if he shows a strong performance tonight, outrunning, for example, Joe Biden, who is, for moderates, really the most popular candidate. He was the vice president during Barack Obama's time in the White House. And so the people who support him and his policies and his kind of middle-of-the-road stance will be concerned about a progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders getting all this momentum behind him.
Absolutely. And last but not the least, Kate, in the meanwhile, Trump's lawyers have been wrapping up the case for defense of the president. How crucial is today's caucus with regards to tomorrow? And, of course, Donald Trump, who barely has any competition.
Well, I think I've noticed one thing that hasn't been talked about while I've been in Iowa is impeachment. The Democratic candidates don't really seem to want to bring it up on the campaign trail. I think they're hoping that now there is no chance of any kind of witnesses being called or any possibility of conviction of the president. They really just want to move on and concentrate on the 2020 election. So it's not been a huge factor here. Of course, it's been very significant because it's meant that those senators that have been holed up in the Senate chamber for the impeachment proceedings have finally been allowed to come back to Iowa to restart their campaigns. It has meant that they have been somewhat delayed in many of the events they would have wanted to do, and it's given people like Pete Buttigieg a real advantage because he's been able to campaign during the time that the impeachment trial was taking place, whereas people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are senators, couldn't leave Washington to do that.
All right, that's an interesting observation. Thank you so much, Kate, for giving us all those details and reporting live from the heart of all the action that is Iowa today. We'll keep coming back to you for more updates. Thank you so much.